everyone.
Rabbi Isai, welcome back to Yerushalmi Demai. Now, we actually started last week, so we've already recorded the first 13 blak. So we're now actually up to the second pack, which is Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. On the old Vilna pages, it's Daf Zayin. So now we have learned there was a gezerah that we should be mafresh ma'asros from Demai. From now, the gezerah was on the fruit which grew in Eretz Yisrael, in the place where the people returned from Olei Bavel. And if you buy fruit in the places where the Olei Bavel were not there, you do not have to take ma'asros on Demai, because you assume that they grew in the place where they are, and they will no takon on Demai. You don't have to worry whether it was Eretz Yisrael stuff that became holy through Olei Bavel, and that was brought there. Now, there are peros therefore included in this, that if you buy them in the places where it was not this Kaddish Olei Bavel, there are places where you still have to ma'aser them because of Demai, even though the Olei Bavel never got there. So, let's see. The following types of fruits, where there is a chiyuv ma'asros, Demai, b'chol mokum, wherever you buy them, even in the places which Olei Bavel never got to. So we've got hadvela, which is these types of pressed figs, v'hatmorim and dates, v'haruvin and carobs, ha'ires, type of rice, v'hakamun. Kamun is one of the spices, isn't it? These minim, you don't really find them in chutz la'aretz. Therefore, it was noticeable that they grew in Eretz Yisrael, and one who buys them wherever they were, you would have to take ma'aser mishum demai, right? Now, if you've got, let's say, fruit that grows abroad and comes into Eretz Yisrael, if it's like the fruit that grows in Eretz Yisrael, also you have to take demai, and that's Xeris Chachamim. You know, we're worried people make a mistake; they'll swap the peros which you have in Israel with the peros you brought in from abroad. If you just don't separate ma'aser, you'll get from Demai, then you're going to be matter even fruit that grew in Eretz Yisrael without any separating ma'aser from Demai. So these are sort of things that grow abroad. Certain types which grow abroad, you're allowed to eat them in Eretz Yisrael without separating Demai. Okay, so the list we've had now, Miss Asrin, they are Chaim ma'asros Demai b'chol mokum. Now we're going to see now, and we mentioned this list, okay. Because the reason is that you don't find them in chutz la'aretz. We know they grew in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore you have to take ma'aser. Ha'ayres shebachutz la'aretz. Now, when it comes to this type of rice which grows abroad, kol mishtamish v'menu, and whatever use you use it for, even in Eretz Yisrael, patur. You are patur from taking ma'aser because of Demai. Why? Because it grows abroad, it's noticeably different from that which grows in Eretz Yisrael. So we don't have to worry that you're going to make a mistake with the rice that grew in Eretz Yisrael. So something which is noticeably different, you don't have to worry about it. So, this idea of what we said actually, just to explain. So these things are chiyuv ma'asros. It sounds like the first list we said, because they're similar to Eretz Yisrael, they have a chiyuv ma'aser wherever you are. It sounds like everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world you'll have a chiyuv ma'aser because this thing is similar to what grows in Eretz Yisrael. Now the Rambam paskins the chiyuv ma'aser should demai only when they're actually in Eretz Yisrael. Even though, let's say Olei Mitzrayim got to, Olei Bavel didn't get to, Olei Mitzrayim got to. Or if they're in Syria, right? Maybe Aram Tzova, which is near Eretz Yisrael, where Dovid HaMelech conquered, right? It didn't have proper Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, but that sort of thing. Maybe the areas which are near, you would have a chiyuv ma'asros.
Is this halacha l'maisa?
Well, it's nowadays. The whole thing is drabanan anyway. On lots of these
like
things.
The Jaffa oranges used to come from Jaffa, but now they grow in Spain.
They grow everywhere.
In California.
So we don't. So according to the Rambam, the peros that grew in Syria are like peros which grew in Eretz Yisrael, where Olei Bavel never got there. They're not chayv ma'aser mishum demai. Okay. The Parshim discuss his shitta. Why they're not chayv ma'aser mishum demai if they're found elsewhere. If there's nothing like it, and we know it comes from Eretz Yisrael, then of course you should be chayv ma'aser, right? Because of wherever it is. So some say, look, we know they're from Eretz Yisrael, but there was no gezerah of Shum Demai unless it's the places where Olei Mitzrayim got to, because they're close to Eretz Yisrael, something like that. So there's a whole discussion as to where is the chiyuv ma'aser and what sort of produce. Okay, the other Mefarshim Paskin, our Mishnah, straightforward, that these minim are chayv ma'aser mishum demai wherever they are, because they are similar to Eretz Yisrael produce. They are chayv ma'aser wherever they are. That's how some want to learn. That's the Rash. It's Chaylik on the Rambam. Okay, but the Rambam wanted to say only if it's nearer to Eretz Yisrael. It's got to be near for the Chiyuv to come about. Okay. Yeah, so it's the sort of type which you don't find abroad and it's noticeable they come from Eretz Yisrael. That's what we're talking about. Okay, where we are. Taman Tanina. We've learnt in Maestros. Shum Balbechi, which is a sort of garlic which comes from a place called Balbechi. Or Batsel Shal Rechba, again a type of onion which comes from a place called Rechba. Or Grisin HaKilkin, which is types of beans which come from the Kilki place. Okay. Vadoshim HaMitzvahs, the Egyptian lentils, which you found in Egypt, they're all potter from Maestros. Why? Because they grow wildly. People don't grow them in the gardens. They have a chazaka they grew in Hefka, and Hefka is, of course, potter from Maser.
Isn't grisin barley?
Right? What?
Grisin, I think, is barley.
Grisin are... Well, Grisin are kilted. He translates them here as pulim, as beans. Siren is usually barley. Grisin are sort of beans of some kind. Now, we got an expression in the Mishnah in Maestros. Let's see. There's a Tosefta in Maestros. Let's see what a reference to Maestros here. Haminim halalu. The Mishnah mentions things which are potter from Maestros. Alidei sheyesh keyotze behen be'eretz Yisrael, because something grows like it, similar to it in Eretz Yisrael, where there's chiyuv Maestros. Therefore, Sarchu Chachamim, the Chachamim required to mention them in his Mishnah, Liten Lahen Simon, to give you a noticeable sign. You should know these are the ones that are potter from Maestros and they grow in a Hefka state. So there are similar ones in Eretz Yisrael which we chayv Maestros, but these are potter, right? They're potter from Maestros. He says they're potter from Maestros if we know where they grow. And we assume they came from Hefka. If we know that they grew in, let's say, a garden with a proper secure garden, then they would be Chaim Meiser. But because they're growing in a Hefka state, they are potter. Avo, bat, ha'il sarin. Now this is a type of, one of the Besamim, lots you find in the Pasuk, right? And so which one is it? Mentioned in Bereshis 43:11. How do they translate the lights as well? Again?
Pine nuts.
Which one? Pine nuts. But that's the next one, I think. That's coming up soon. But pistakin, which is types of nuts of some kind, but istrabodin, I think, are the pine nuts, actually.
Hazelnuts, pistachios, and pine cones.
Which ones?
Hazelnuts,
pistachios, and pine cones. Okay. You don't find anything like it in Eretz Yisrael. So there's no Chiv Torah Maestros at all. The Chacham didn't have to give a sign, we should know this one is Hefka, potter from Meiser. Because anything looks like this is potter from Meiser, because you don't find these things in Eretz Yisrael, so the Mishnah therefore didn't mention those at all in the list. Okay, so it mentions the ones where there is a type, that we said, the Batzel of Richba, and these places you have to know, whereas this other list have completely nothing to do with, they don't look like anything that grows in Eretz Yisrael, okay? They're completely potter from Maestros. So we don't have to mention them that they're chazaka, they grew behefka, because whatever happens, wherever they grew, they're potter from Maestros, okay? It's like the rice, which we mentioned, which grows abroad, and it's noticeable, it doesn't look like the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael, it's got no chiyuv Maestros at all. Okay, fine. Now, what is the difference between our Mishnah and the Mishnah in Maestros? So the Mishnah in Maestros mentioned a list of where things you have to worry about, and we mentioned a list where you have to worry about. Hadomas Nisa, our Mishnah, he chilufa, is the opposite of the Mishnah in Maestros in one respect. He says, our Mishnah tells you, chiyuv, the chiyuv of Maestros because of Demai, minin ha'elu, on these which are mentioned, and there's chiyuv Maestros wherever they are found, because they are similar to the produce in Eretz Yisrael. And alidei she'en kiyotze behen. You don't usually find things growing like that, similar to that. B'chutz la'aretz. Therefore, it's noticeable they grew in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, wherever they are, they're Chaim Maestros, because Demai, wherever they are. So Tzarcha Chachamim Limnaisan. So the Chachamim have to mention these types to tell you, since they grow in Eretz Yisrael, they're Chaim Maestros because of Demai, wherever. Whereas the Mishnah in Maestros tells you that these things are potter from Maestros because they probably grew behefka, and therefore it doesn't mention the types which only grew in Chutz La'aretz, because they're wherever potter. Right? See that again. So the Mishnah in Maestros tells you the things which are potter from Maestros because they grew in a state of hefka. That's what it says. So he didn't mention the ones that grow only in Chutz La'aretz, because anyway they're potter from Maasros. Okay, fine. He says here in the notes, what's the difference between our Mishnah and the Mishnah Maasros? The Mishnah Maasros doesn't have to say which ones are hefka for the ones that don't grow in Eretz Yisrael. We know if they only grow in Chutz La'aretz, the question doesn't start. Of course, they're potter from Maasros. And yet, our Mishnah in Demai wanted to mention the ones that grow in Eretz Yisrael and not Chutz La'aretz. And we're not saying that we know that all these minim only grow in Eretz Yisrael and not Chutz La'aretz. So basically, there is a difference between the Mishnayos. The Mishnah in Maasros talks about things which are potter from Maasros. So you don't have to mention that which only grows abroad. Of course, it's potter from Maasros. Our Mishnah is telling you a new chiyuv of Maasros because of Demai, even abroad, right? On the fruit that only grows in Eretz Yisrael. So that's a separate din, and therefore it mentions these types. So that's the chidush. It grows in Eretz Yisrael, but you see it's abroad, therefore there's a chiyuv Maasros abroad. Okay, so let's carry on. Now, so there are 5 types, which is a problem of Demai in every place. And the reason is because they grow in Eretz Yisrael only. So he says, now we mentioned the figs, the pressed figs. But Ba'Yisrael, you find it abroad as well in Ba'Yisrael. Why does the Mishnah say, it must have come from Eretz Yisrael? You find it abroad. So he says, Shechikehi. The one in Ba'Yisrael is very weak and is not very good quality. It's a bit broken down. It's not such good quality as the one in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, that doesn't really count, right? But there are big dates that grow in Alexandria in Egypt. Why are you telling me all the dates are from Eretz Yisrael? He says, those ones are pretty small. They're not big like the dates in Eretz Yisrael. But there are some of the carobs that grow Babiyari in another area of Chutz La'aretz. Why does the Mishnah say, they usually come from Eretz Yisrael? He says, those in Biyari, Gidurhu, there's a lot of edges on them. They're not smooth like the carobs in Eretz Yisrael. And the Mishnah is saying you did only for these straight ones and smooth ones, you can tell that they actually grew in Eretz Yisrael. Okay? The Rambam learns that the Vedas Ta'enim, the fig ones, is known for its sweetness, but you don't find it only in the figs of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, alright, fine. Baha Ires, now there's a type of rice which grows Bechulta, in Chulta abroad, an area in Chutz La'aretz. Why is the Mishnah saying, usually you find rice, it grows in Eretz Yisrael? He says, that one in Chulta is sort of greenish, a symbol called reddish, and it's not white like the rice in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Mishnah is telling you only the din of the white rice is more noticeable it grew in Eretz Yisrael. But Kamon Bekifrus, again, one of the spices over there in Cyprus. Why are you telling me, it's only from Eretz Yisrael? He says, no, Akumu, the pips of it are sort of beds, they're not straight, like the ones which grow in Eretz Yisrael. So our Mishnah is talking about the ones where they're straight, you can tell it came from Eretz Yisrael.
You have to be like a botanist.
What?
You have to be like a botanist to know.
Right, so we learned various types of fruits, which we know they only came from Eretz Yisrael. You have to separate Demai for them wherever they are. Now, what is the situation? Let's see. Amr B'Lazar. Where do Chachamim say that you have to take Ma'aseh Shon Demai out of Suffolk? Ela B'Lekeach, it should be B'Lekeach Mi-Yisrael. That's the Girsah I've got. Where you actually take the fruit from Israel, and it could be the Meicha, the seller, took Ma'aseh already, so therefore there's a chiyuv to be Ma'asering them out of doubt, like the din Demai, right? Okay? Aval Alekeach min Agai, if you buy the fruit from a guy, you don't have to worry, don't assume he maybe took Ma'aseh. So basically, you've got to treat it as Vadai Tevel, right? It's Vadai. It's proper Tevel. If you're buying it from a guy, it's proper Tevel, because the guy would have done nothing about it. Now, that's one opinion. Rav Yochanan, he says, Lo Shanya, he halakach Yisrael, he halakach min Agai. The din is the same. Whether you buy it from Israel or you buy it from a guy, you have to separate Ma'aseh Demai. It's only Demai. Even if you get it from a guy, it's still only Demai and not proper Tevel. So that's the argument, right? If you get it from a guy, is it Demai or is it Tevel? So who said what? Rav Elazar said you get it from a guy, it's Vadai Tevel. And Rav Yochanan said it's only a suffix. Okay. Now Rav Elazar and Yochanan are arguing about the fruit of Eretz Yisrael, which you buy abroad from a guy. Now, do you have to be mafresh as Tevel or is it Demai? So let's see, what the argument based on? Rabbi Lazar Savmeba. So Rabbi Lazar wanted to say, now he was the one who said, if you get it from a guy, it is Vadai Tevel, yeah? So he wanted to say, Right Eretz Yisrael, Nesuna Bial Goyim. Because even the land of Eretz Yisrael mainly are in Goyish ownership, right? So the guy is selling you this fruit. He bought it from another guy who is the owner of the land. So now you have to be mafresh maestros as Tevel Vadai, because the guy never took meister. But Rabbi Yochanan Sava, he says no. So maybe he wanted to say, Right Eretz Yisrael, the son of Yad Yisrael, that really is under Jewish ownership in the majority of the land. So let's assume that the guy who's selling you this fruit bought it from a Jew, and therefore the Jew who buys it now to be separating mice from somebody else to Demai, because it could be the first owner, the first Jewish owner, already took Meiser before he sold it to a guy. You hear that? So the question is, this guy who has it now, where did he get it from? One opinion seems to say he got it from another guy because they're the majority ownership. And the other opinion says, no, he got it from a Jew, and that Jew might have taken Meiser. So you only have a doubt. You've got Demai now. Now, another situation as to the argument of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan. After he Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan, even if he's going to hold that Rabbi Yitzchok instead of Yad Yisrael, that the Jewish people are in control, we can still say he said that when you take the mafresh, you take the virus from a guy, you have to treat it as tevel, not demai. Why is that? Rabbi Lazar chosh lemiut. Rabbi Lazar was worried for miut, even for the minority, and not relying on the rov. Right? The miut land of Eretz Yisrael is in the hands of Goyim, and Rabbi Lazar holds that's enough. You have to worry maybe the fruit came from them. Okay? And therefore it's not considered as Demai, it's considered Tebel, because the Goyim definitely didn't take any Paris, didn't take any Meiser on the Paris. So you hear that? So this answer is saying that Rabbi Lazar is worried about the miut, right? And even if the Goyim didn't have majority ownership, they definitely had a minority ownership. So therefore you have to take Meiser. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan held, you can rely on the Rov, you have to worry about miut. Rov of the land was in Jewish ownership, therefore the Paris came from Israel, and even if now you're buying it from a guy, there's no chiyuv to separate maestros like Tevel. It's like only a din of Demai, because it could be that the Jew already separated the maestros before he went and sold them. Yeah? Okay. Now the Gemara brings a raya from another situation where they're discussing the klal about whether we choshesh lemiut or not. Okay? So Rabbi Say, you remember I've told you many times, and I will tell you again. The Yerushalmi often, compares cases, this idea, we find a similar idea with something completely different, right? So here again, we're talking about, are we chayshish for the miut, that the Goyim own a small proportion of land, and therefore you have to worry that the Meiser wasn't taken. So let's see what's the parallel case we'll bring. Kahada, where do you find a similar idea of worrying about minority? He says like this, Siriki. What is Sirki? Sirki is like a caravan of Arabs who are coming, bringing grain to sell. One day a year, their produce is dodgy. It comes from the produce of Eretz Yisrael, which has a chiyuv maestros. One day a year. The rest of the year, they get permitted produce. So the din is, that one day where there's a problem, creates a problem every day, and you have to worry that everything is forbidden, even if the rest of the year they get produce from permitted places. So you see, because of the miut hatzvua, which is also that one day a year you worry for the whole year. And so the same thing here. You got miut of land amongst the goyim who own ownership in the land. They only own a small percentage, but you have to worry. Maybe the fruit that the guy is selling now came from that guy who owned the land, and therefore you have to take Meiser as Tevel and not as Demai. Okay?
And if you say it was Demai, then you wouldn't be Chayshish?
No, Demai means you have to treat it as a suffix. So you'll be Mafresh as a suffix.
Right.
Whereas Vadai is Vadai Tevel. So that's the difference.
Because of Demai?
We're worried. No, same idea. So just like we're machmir that the produce of one day tells me there's a problem every day of the year, so also, if a guy owns a small share of the land in Eretz Yisrael, we have to assume that this piece of land, the guy is giving you now, came from a guy who owned the land and was never mafresh anything. So you have to be mafresh now als tevel, basically. That's what we're saying. You hear the comparison. Because there's a minority guy who owns the land, so therefore now that a guy is selling you produce, it might have come from that guy who owned the land, yeah? And therefore you have to treat it as tevel, and that no mice has been taken yet, because of that minority guy who owns land. Yeah? That's what we're saying here.
I would have thought double suffering.
I know. I mean, we find elsewhere where Rameya's chayshish lemiyot min ha-Torah. And the question is, what are we doing now? Rabbi Lazar seems to hold like Rameya. He's the one who's worried about miyot. Or maybe min ha-Torah you're following the Rav. It's a churma drabanan that we're chayshish for miyot. Usually, Rabbi Lazar does follow the Rav. But in certain cases, there's special reasons why he says we don't follow the Rav. Okay.
Something deraisa.
Yeah. Let's see again now here. And now the Gemara's going to bring another. The Gemara's now going to push away Rabbi Lazar and say no. He actually has another idea why he says what he says. So Rabbi Yossi asked Me'ata, if that's the case, that we're wide for miyot. So again, another completely different case is Ger Sheba Lehiskaya. A convert comes to the Beis Din. We don't know what nation is he from. So the din should be we should not accept him to marry into the Jewish people. Because Ani Omer, why do I not assume Me'aman and Moav who? He's from Ammon and Moav, who are not allowed to marry the Jewish people, even if they become Jewish. Right? If we don't know what nation he's from, there is Ammon and Moav, you can't take them in. Now, nowadays, why are we not worried about that? Because Sancherev came and messed everything around, and now people come from the Rav, and most people are not Ammon and Moav, right? But there was a suggestion, if you are worried about miyut, that's about being mafresh maisa, so then you shouldn't accept a person because he might be from Ammon and Moav, right? He's coming to become a ger. We don't know what nation he's from. We don't worry about miyut. Here as well, it can't be agreed that you can't say that he holds most of Eretz Yisrael is in the hands of Israel is chayshish from miyut to the fruit sold from the goyim, because then you should follow the Rav. You shouldn't worry about miyut at all. Alright, so let's see what we got. So he says, "V'nasa isa ger heichiach." Now, according to what you've said, we should worry with all gerim that come along to say no, because there might be Ammon and Moav coming. They should all be forbidden. Now the din is, gerim, we don't know what nation they come from, they're allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. So you see, we follow the Rav. We don't worry about the minority. So if that's the case, you can't tell me that Rebbe Lezer holds Rav Eretz Yisrael is in the hands of Yisrael, is chayshish for the miyut in the hands of the goyim, right? You can't tell me he's chayshish for miyut. If he's chayshish for miyut, he should forbid all gerim to come in case they're Ammon and Moav. All right? The truth is there are differences between, again, what is the comparison here? He says the problem is there's a difference where we know that a miyut of the produce, let's say the caravan that comes once a year, right? We know one day a year there's a serious problem there. We know that's a problem. One day a year they have forbidden produce. Again, we assume that we're worrying and assuming that he's a miyut of Ammon and Moav. We don't know for sure. It's not like the caravan, there's a problem once a year, right? You're assuming, we know that there might be 1% that are Ammon and Moav. We don't know this is the case here. I mean, here we're assuming that some of the fruit that the guy bought in Eretz Yisrael was bought from a guy. We don't really know that that's the case. So it's not really the same as the caravan where there is a serious problem once a year. You see that? You see that the comparisons are hard. In one case, the miyut is not known for sure. We're following Rav. We don't worry about miyut. In the Brisa, we know for sure there's a problem with the caravan once a year. So we're chayshish for miyut and we don't follow the Rav. Right? Okay? Let's carry on. So what we said now, since the din is that gerim, we don't know what nation they are permitted, so we follow the Rav, we don't worry about the miyut. So don't tell me Rebbe Lezer holds Rav Yisrael is in the hands of Israel, is chayshish for the miyut in the hands of the goyim. Ella, you have to say, Kainil. This is the machlokes between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Lazar Savimema, he wanted to say Rai B'Eretz Yisrael Nesuna B'Yad Goyim, that it's in the hands of the Goyim, the land. Therefore, Achavro, you're following the Rive, right? And the guy who's selling you the fruit, he bought it from another guy, right? And therefore, the Jew has to be mafresh maestros as proper tebel, because the guy definitely didn't take master. Rabbi Yochanan Savimema. And Rabbi Yochanan say, Rai B'Eretz Yisrael Nesuna B'Yad Yisrael. No, most ownership of the land is in Jewish hands. And we follow the Rive, and we say the guy who's selling you the fruit now bought them from Israel. Therefore, the Israel's chayav, when you buy this fruit, to be mafresh maestros medin demai, you only have a demai obligation, right? Because it could be the original Jewish owner took maisa before he actually went and sold them. So at the moment, what we just now said, that the argument Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan is, it's a Messiah's argument. Is most of the land in Israel in Jewish hands or non-Jewish hands? That's what they're arguing about. You hear that? Rabbi Lazar holds that most majority of the land is non-Jewish hands, so you assume Maisa wasn't taken and therefore it's proper tevel. And Rabbi Yochanan holds no, most Maisa is in the hands of Jewish owners and the Maisa would have been taken. All right. So it's not about whether we're worried about meals or not. It's they're arguing as to what is the rove. Right? But another Raya Rabbi Lazar is not worried about the meals of that tiny percentage of land in the hands of a goyim. He holds no, most of the land is in non-Jewish hands. We min Harav from the following story. Rav Zeira Sholach Sha'al, he asked a question to Rabbi Alexander the Tzedakah. He was to live in Eretz Yisrael in a place called Tzedakah. He says, Ilain Nik Lav Saya. There's types of fruit. Dahacha, which is brought here from Tzedakah. Ma'atun Masharim Bain. How do you treat them? Rive min Agaim. Is the majority of them coming from land in the Gaisha hands, and therefore it's proper temel? Ruban mi Yisrael, or most of it comes from land in Jewish ownership, and therefore it's only Demai. So, is it Rive Gaisha land, or is it Rive Jewish owned land? Amalei, he said to him, Alexander answered of Zehira, Les anan yachlin Masharim Bain. We can't really work it out. We don't really know. It's a bit hard. It's a suffix. Is the rive reaching from the hands of a guy? You have to take Meiser with Tebel. A rive's coming from the hands of Israel. It's only Demai. It's not clear. What do we see from here? If the rive is coming from land in Goyish ownership, it would be Tebel. If the rive is coming from land with Jewish ownership, it would be Demai. And they're not worried about the meals, right, that comes from the guy. So don't tell me the reason Rabbi Lezer agrees to as far as the payers which comes, you have to treat it as tevel because he holds, we're worried about meals. It's not to do with meals. It's because he holds rive of the land was in non-Jewish ownership. That's what he holds. Okay. After we brought this argument between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to bring up supports to all the different opinions. So remember, one opinion said the question is, do we worry about meals or not? And the other opinion said, no, their argument is to what is the rive? What is the situation? Who owns most of the land? So let's see. Masnisa Masayaladik. Brisa supports Rabbi Lazar, who holds that the Paris of Eretz Yisrael, well, we don't know who grew it, is Tebel, because that's actually based on the second rationale, that most of the land is in Goisha ownership. So we're going to bring support to this. But Masnisa Masayaladik. There's also Brisa supporting Rabbi Yochanan, who holds it's only Demai because most of the land is in Jewish ownership. So we're going to bring support to both opinions. Is the land in Jewish ownership or non-Jewish ownership? Let's see. Masnisa Messiah, the Rabbi Lazar. Brisa brings support to Rabbi Lazar. That is non-Jewish ownership. It brings it to Sefta. Fruit which is bought min hataga. The taga is the merchant who buys fruit in one place and sells them elsewhere. But whether they were brought in Eretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz, they are Chaim Maestros because of Demai. Masai, when is this din said that the Chaim Maestros says Demai? This man Shuraiv Mechnasai. Most of the fruit that this merchant buys and takes in his domain is Yisrael. Right? Most of his stuff he gets from a Jewish person. So since most payers are from Israel, and it could be the Jewish person already set aside the maestros, therefore, now when you buy it, you treat it as Demai, you have to be mafresh as Demai. If this merchant bought fruit from an agai, and we don't know if the majority that he gets is from a Jew or a non-Jew, then when you buy off him, you have to separate as Tevel, Vadai. You have to assume that there was no maestros taken at all, right? And you say the Paris was bought from a guy in Eretz Yisrael, and that the majority of Eretz Yisrael is in the hands of Goyim, and they definitely didn't separate Maestros. So this brisa takes on clearly, like Rabbi Lazar, that the fruit of Eretz Yisrael, we don't know if it's bought from a Jew or a non-Jew. You assume it was bought from a non-Jew, and that's why you have to separate Maestros and treat it as Tevel. You get that? So the two brises supporting both views. What was the majority ownership in the land? Now the Gemara brings another brisa, and it discusses, it's a support to the view of Rabbi Yochanan. Let's see. Masnisa Messiah. We got the following brisa supporting Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that the parents of Eretz Yisrael, we know, if we don't know who grew it, you treat it as Demai, because most of the land was in Jewish ownership. Tani will enter the brisa from Nehemiah. He said, when you have fruit from the merchant, Echad guy, whether the merchant who he says that he bought it from a guy, but Echad Yisrael, or he says he bought it from Yisrael who was careful and a chaver, Echad Kuti, or he says he bought it from a Kuti, Echad Amaretz, or from Amaretz. We know that sometimes Pa'amim Shulakech, he buys from various places. So Pa'amachas he'll buy it min Agai, Pa'amachas another time he'll buy it from Israel. Therefore, you have to take Maestros as Demai, and it's not Tevel. Because he will get it from all over different places, and he may get it from Israel as well. So therefore, you treat it as Demai, not Tevel. Okay? Rav Chia Ba'ada, Ba'ikum Rabbana, they asked in front of Rabbana, now why does Rav Nehemiah say that the Paris that the merchant, you buy off the merchant, where he usually goes to various places, you treat it as Demai? Now, Rabbi say again, Yerushalmi has, it's a classic Yerushalmi, Rabbi say. There are times when Yerushalmi says something, and then the Gemara says, well, if you're not sure about it, go and ask him. Right? Classic Yerushalmi does that. And here it does it again. Look at this. They asked in front of Rabbana, why did Nehemiah say that the fruit you bought from the merchant, when he sometimes goes to all various places, we don't know where he went to, you treat it as Demai? Rabbi said, what's the next question? Mimi lokach ha'ish hazeh. Let's ask him. Ask him. Where did he get it from? There is another Yerushalmi where it's about something found. This thing I can't remember exactly. And the Yerushalmi says, "Go and ask him." And the Yerushalmi answer is, do you remember? He says, "Oh, he became a deaf mute. We couldn't ask him." That's the Yerushalmi's answer. There. But here again,
no, but again, if it's
ask
if it's an Okan, there's no modest. If you're it's going to come with a wagon one day.
He may not know.
He'll know you're not going to buy it. He'll tell you it's not.
He may not know why you're asking him. Okay.
They'll learn very quickly.
Ask him who he got it from. Yerushalmi comes up with that question. Noima, and if he tells me Israel, then it'll be Demai. If he tells, at least L'chumra, right? If he says it's, I got it from a guy, then you know it's Badai. When I go, Badai, treat it as Demai. But anyway, you're going to take my son. The question is, you're going to treat it as Tev, or you're going to treat it as Demai? So the Gemara answers the Brisa, and it's actually going to be a support to Rabbi Yochanan. Tifta, we can explain the Brisa talking about a case. Shahaya Hatago guy. The merchant is the guy, and Yisrael the guy Mentalin Lefanov, and they were in front of him, a Jew and a non-Jew, and he bought fruit from both of them, and we don't know the fruit they bought now from the Taga, was it from the Jew passing by, or was it the non-Jew? And the Taga is not believed to say he bought from one of them. From Nehemiah Paskin, you have to treat it like other parents Safek. Where do you get it from? He treat it as Demai. So we learn from this brisa, it takes on like Rabbi Yochanan, that the parents that are bought from a guy and we don't know where he got them from, you treat it as Demai. And that's the right to Rabbi Yochanan. And it's a question of Rabbi Lazar. Okay? So that's the right to Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to ask on Rabbi Lazar, Hasib Rabbi Shia, Masnisa Messiah Rabbi Yochanan. And so we got a Mishnah actually, we support Rabbi Yochanan. The Tani we learned in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Kalim now. Oh, Rabbi Yehuda. Now you may remember, if any of you learnt Taruvas, the laws of Taruvas, and there's 7 types of fruit, which when they're Isurei Kalayim or whatever, they're Osur and they're not Botel, they're very significant fruit, and if they've got an Isur, they're not Botel, and one of them was Rimone Badon. these certain types of pomegranates, which if they were osur, like they were kalayim or orla, whatever it is, they're not botel in other pomegranates, whatever it is. They were chosher, basically. Now, we're mentioning these pomegranates here. Aruyuda. Now, these pomegranates, which grew in Israel in a place called Badon, this is the leek, who grew in Israel in a place called Geba. Now, why were they mentioned? They are treated as proper tevel, not demai, but everywhere, even abroad. Because these were places of kutim, and it wasn't the way of the kutim to separate maestros on stuff that they were going to sell. So you can assume it's proper tevel. Okay? Now, so why is this going to be a question on Rabbi Elazar? Let's see now. So what's he saying? That these pomegranates are definite tevel. Fine. And now, now what are we talking about here? Because if you buy these things from a Jew, would you say in that situation it's vadai, that's proper tevel? When you get it from another Jew, why would that be proper tevel? Definitely not. You buy it for, if you payers which you buy from Yisrael Amaretz, it's only Demai, right? It's not proper tevel. Ella, you have to tell me. What are you talking about? You bought the fruit from a guy. In this situation, we say you have to be meister the payers as proper tevel, right? Proper tevel. Now, what are we talking about? Only these certain type of pomegranates, right? He says we only said this did with these two types, Rimane Badon and Chatse Geba, this type of leek and that type of pomegranate. We're saying it's proper tevel. Hoshar Kol Dvarim, any other fruit that grows in Eretz Yisrael and it's bought from a guy, you have to take Maisa like Demai. So the Mishnah takes on like the view of Rabbi Yochanan and not like Rabbi Elazar. We treat it as Demai. And so proves to Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchok, he says, you know what? We can hold like Rabbi Elazar. When you buy fruit from a guy, you treat it as proper tevel. Now don't ask me, it's mashma in the Mishnah that other fruit is only Demai. He says, no. We're talking about a case, but a kach Yisrael and Ankiyamin. That Mishnah is talking about a case where you buy it from a Jew. Now then Rav Oshia asks, why do I have to take Maisa of these pomegranates as tevel if I bought it from a Jew? Why is it tevel? He says, Tiftar, explain the case that at the time of the selling of the fruit, Agronimus Gadol. Agronimus Gadol. Agronomos is someone who works for the government, who commands shops to keep their prices down. So there was pressure from above, pressure to lower the prices from the government. And therefore, B'dahak Olav, this pushed the seller, Lias Moicha Bazal, to sell the fruit cheaper than was acceptable. And in this situation, the Chachamim allowed the seller, Lias Moicha, to sell the fruit as Tevarim, as Tebel, without separating maestros. Because he was pushed so much on the price, the Chachamim allowed him, you know what, you're selling it, you don't have to take maestros on it. Because of the government pressure that was there. So if you buy it from a Nochri, definitely Tevel. And these were places of Kutim, okay. But then the answer is that, there was pressure. In the end, you're buying it from a Jew, but there was pressure to keep the prices down.
You just put up a sign in the shop and say,
I know.
It's like buying meat and it says on the meat Lahoch Shar.
I know. All right. Let's carry on. Okay. Right. So the one who buys it should know he has to be careful and take Maser as Tevel. But in a normal case, when you're buying fruit from Israel, you don't have to Maser only like Demai. And it comes out the Mishnah is not talking at all about someone who bought Paris from a guy, and therefore there's no support to Rabbi Yochanan and the question on Rabbi Elazar. We've sort of rejected the question, and there's no support to Rabbi Yochanan from here. Okay. Now, So you're buying it from. So in the end of it, as we say, you're buying it from Israel, and you should take. Normally, you take Paris as Demai, but if the government were forcing him to keep price cheap, then it's Tebel, and you have to take it and treat it as Vadai. It could be that he says these fruits were very significant, so maybe there was more pressure on them more than other fruit. Okay, because they're important. As I said, they're not batel, those things that remind Badon over there in Taurus. Okay, now fruit which is bought from the merchant is Chaim Maisvis Mishum Demai. Ezel Atago. So what sort of merchant are we talking about? We're selling fruit, and he's selling fruit of others, and not fruit from his own field. Kol Shehevi, he brought fruit to sell in the market. V'shana v'shilesh. He's brought fruit 3 times. You follow that? He's a recognized merchant, a wholesaler. He brought fruit 3 times in the market. He's growing from other people's fruit. It's not his own fruit. Okay? Rabbi Yonah said, Hevi shloisha, if he brings on the market shloisha masuim, 3 lorries, 3 loads, where usually you would bring it 3 separate occasions, but he brought 3 loads, ka'achas, in one go. Ein zeh tago, that does not yet make him into a merchant, because he only came to the market once. But if he brings into the market zeh chazeh on various occasions, taga, that makes him into a merchant. So he's allowed, someone who brings 3 loads, 3 separate occasions, is the merchant. Rav Yonah asked, now if he brings 3 loads, lemafrei, now this is another Yerushalmi quirk, Rabbi Sai. The Yerushalmi not often, there's like 5 or 6 cases in Yerushalmi, where it says, what about the mafreya? What would be the din lemafreya? You don't? No, retroactively. If something happens a few times, when did it change? When did the status change? It needs 3 times to happen. Did it change after the 3rd time now? Or do we say it's changed from the first time? Retroactively. It's Yerushalmi 4 or 5 places treats with the Mafreyas. There's other cases. I've got my Sefer, it's got the list of them. So here as well, this load, he's brought 3 loads to the market. Lemafreyai. Do we say when he brings the first load, he was treated as a merchant then? Or only now that he's brought the 3rd load, we treat him as a merchant. Yeah? It's not an Asamech though, I'll tell you, it's a Yerushalmi, right? When do we say that his situation changed? In Bavli you have like Eidim, which were found batel at the first Eidos they gave, and the later Eidos and in between, but you don't always find clear Lemafreya questions in Yerushalmi. Ma nafka mi b'nei. What's the difference between the 2 sides? The difference is, Baba Hiskin, if he wants, the one who's buying it, wants to separate Maestros from the pairs that he bought from the first load for the pairs that he bought from the 3rd load. You hear that? The purchaser is separating first load for the 3rd load. In Tema, you're going to tell me, Mikan Labar, he's only a merchant from the 3rd one onwards, but not before, then Ein Ma'aset Zeh al Zeh. You can't take Maestro's first load for the 3rd one. The first load is Tevel, and the 3rd load is Demai. You can't take Maestro Tevel for Demai. But if you're going to tell me it comes out that he was Muhzik as a merchant from the beginning, when he bought the first load already, then the one who buys it is allowed to be Mafresh Maestros from the Paris of the first load for the 3rd load, because they've all got the same din. You have to separate Maestros as Demai, like the one who buys Paris from a merchant. And it's a very good question, but of course, we have no answer. Right? No, so this merchant, anyway, if he brings it one go, we said he's not muhzik. Ramana wasn't sure. Yeah, let's see the next bit. Ramana by who ubanaya pilai. If the 3 loads came to the market in one go, but through 3 people, the seller, his son, and his worker, Mahushi Stafu, do they join up the Shloisha Masuin to be 3 loads ka'achas? And therefore, is it as 3 loads as 1, and he's not a taga? Or maybe since the 3 loaves were brought through 3 people, therefore as if they were brought on 3 occasions, and he is a merchant. Rav Yonah asked, now what is this question, him and his worker and his son? I mean, it's like the following. Sfina Abba Meroimi, Kama minin yeshbo, you have a ship bringing produce, tons of produce, and yet I'd realize that we treat it kilo echad, as if it's one go. To be a merchant, it's this one load, all the fruit on the ship in one go. So him, his worker, his son, they all brought the fruit in one go. It should be one load. It shouldn't be muhsik as a tagger for that. All right. I think we will stop here. Okay.